I, 33, female, have been married to my husband for just a few weeks, and I am starting to worry that I might not know him very well. I had been single for a long time when I met my fiance for the first time. I had a bad breakup in my mid 20s, and it took me years to move on. I just couldn't trust anyone after that. Nevertheless, my family kept putting pressure on me to find a guy and get married. They had been really sad when I broke up with my ex-boyfriend. They thought that we would get married one day, but when it didn't happen, they started to tell me to move on and find someone else. It was easier said than done. They never understood that it was hard for me to move on and just be with someone else. It went on for so long that I started to hate going to my parents' place for holidays because I knew they would ask if I was seeing someone. I didn't want to disappoint them, but I knew they wanted me to get married in my 20s. My family is traditional like that, and I couldn't bear the look of disappointment on their faces when I told them that I was single year after year. They never outright said that they were disappointed or anything, but their little taunts just got to me. I wanted to make them happy, and it wasn't like I was actively avoiding men. I was dating, but no one was good enough for anything serious. After I turned 30, my parents' taunts became a lot in your face. They would tell me that I wasn't getting any younger and that I should settle down as soon as possible. I would feel so embarrassed when they brought up my younger cousins who were happily married with kids. I started to feel like I was doing something wrong by being single. It started to affect my mental health a lot as well. I started to make up excuses so I wouldn't have to face my family. And then I started to find a husband for myself way too eagerly. It wasn't healthy how adamant I was about getting married and getting everyone off my back. I just thought if I got married, all my family would finally stop looking at me like a failure. I had a good job, I had my own place, and I had my own car, but nothing was good enough. I started to feel like a failure because of it. I started to spiral and think, what good is my job if I don't have anyone to love me? It was certainly a dark time in my life. Nobody should have to get married because of familial pressure or because they want to make someone else happy, and that's exactly what happened to me. I met my now fiance on a dating app. I had a few bad experiences with online dating, so I wasn't holding my breath about finding a husband there. So when my fiance asked me out on a date, I didn't think it would turn into something serious. I went on the date with an open mind and was pleasantly surprised when he turned out to be the most decent guy I have been on dates with in recent times. He was attentive, funny, and much like other guys in the app, he didn't lie about his physical appearance. He looked the same as his pictures, and he wasn't full of himself either. He was asking me questions and answering my questions honestly, and the whole date just went on effortlessly. I didn't even have to think about it when he asked for a second date. I was feeling pretty good about him and me. We went on a couple more dates and then he told me that he didn't want a temporary fling. He was looking for something serious, and if I can't give that, then we should stop dating. I was taken aback at first, but then I told him that I wanted that too. My parents' taunts were always ringing in my ears, and the fear of not finding a husband was getting greater and greater. He was happy to hear that, so we kept going on dates after that. After about 6 months of dating, he started to drop hints that he wanted to marry me. We had met each other's parents a couple of times by then, and my parents were over the moon that I finally had someone in my life. His family was happy about us too, except his mother, who did not interact with me at all. I was sure I would win her over eventually. I wasn't very worried about that. What I was worried about was the fact that our relationship was going way too fast. I didn't even think we knew each other well enough to talk about a wedding, but he was very sure of it. So when he proposed about 7 months into our relationship, I said yes. I was hesitant at first, but then I heard my parents' voice in the back of my head, and I just couldn't say no. There was nothing wrong with him. I just wanted a little more time. After our engagement, though, I was happy that he gave me about 6 more months before we had to get married. It was perfect. He put my worries about moving too fast to rest by giving me time to come to terms with it. I thought I hit the jackpot with him. We started planning our wedding, and that's when things started to change for me. I got a few calls from different numbers telling me that I shouldn't marry him. The first time it happened, I went straight to him and told him about it. He had no idea whose number it was, but he assured me that it must be his jealous ex-girlfriend. I let it go. Then it happened a couple more times, and each time we would get into a fight. I thought he was having an affair, but he assured me that he had nothing to do with the phone calls and I shouldn't give them any mind. I just had a weird feeling about it, but he wasn't doing anything wrong, so I let it go. We kept planning our wedding. My parents were super happy, so that made me happy too. His dad and brother were also very much involved in the planning, but his mother was still distant. Every time I wanted to spend some time with her, my fiancé would tell me no. He told me that his mother was suffering from depression and he didn't want me alone with her. He said not to take her indifference to heart and that she will come along once we are married. I really wanted to get to know her before the wedding, but he was adamant that I keep my distance. I did stay away from her because I didn't want to make her condition worse. He told me that his mother never responded well to new people, so I shouldn't take it personally at all. I mean, he knew his mother best, so I just accepted what he told me. Things went on like that for a few months while we were planning the wedding. His mother and her issues took a back burner in my mind because I was so busy planning our wedding. I still thought that it was super weird that he wouldn't let me chat with his mother, but at the same time, I understood where he was coming from. She had been ill for a while, and he just wanted to protect her. He told me that she had been on medication and that I would be able to meet her soon. He also told me not to take what she says to heart because half the time she doesn't even know what she's talking about. I felt so bad for her, but I was sure I would get to know her after we got married, so I put all my focus on the wedding planning for the time being. When everything was done and there were just a couple of days until the wedding, my mother organized a spa day for me and my bridesmaids. I decided to invite my mother-in-law too since my mom was going. I was surprised when my husband told me that his mother would join us. I was not expecting that when I invited her, but I was happy that she could come. I really wanted her to like me and get to know me. The whole day when we were together, she remained silent. She didn't interact with anyone, but she didn't say anything mean. She just looked very lost. I tried to make her as comfortable as I could, but she just seemed distracted. I just thought that her behavior was because of her illness and all the new people she was surrounded by. I had this feeling that she wanted to say something or tell me something, but she couldn't because we weren't alone and she didn't trust anyone. Maybe I was just being paranoid, but it all made sense when she pulled me aside just before our wedding. I was getting ready with my friends in the bridal suite when my mother-in-law came and sat by my side. We made some small talk. She was being restless, so I asked if she needed something. She asked me if I could get away and talk to her for a minute. I immediately got up and took her to my room. That's when she started talking like I had never seen before. I always thought she was very soft-spoken and didn't talk much, but in my room, away from everyone, she laid all her thoughts out in the open. She told me not to go through with the wedding. I was taken aback at first because why would she sabotage her son's wedding? I thought she was joking, so I started laughing. Then she told me that my husband was not who I thought he was and that I should get away while I had the chance. At this point, I told her not to say anything further out of my loyalty towards my fiancé, but she didn't listen. She told me that my life would be over if I married him, and he was just like his father. She told me that he was cheating on me and that he would make my life hell after the wedding. It was all nonsensical to me, since my fiance had never been anything but kind and good towards me. Then it hit me. My fiance had told me that she sometimes said things that didn't even make sense. She was quite ill, and letting her words get to me would not be a good idea. She would probably regret saying those things once she understood the depth of the situation. I told her that I would think over what she told me to appease her and calm her down. Once she was calm, I led her outside to the venue and came back to get ready. I, of course, went through the wedding ceremony and married my husband that day. 1 week into the marriage, I started to think back to my mother-in-law's warning because my husband started behaving abnormally. He became really distant and aloof. This sudden behavior change happened in just a week. We should have been in our honeymoon phase, but I was all alone at this foreign house contemplating if I made a mistake. He wasn't even home half the time, and the other half he was there, he would just ignore me. I didn't know what to think of it. He was giving me whiplash with his mood swings, and I started to get suspicious. My mother-in-law did tell me that he was cheating, and now I started to think that maybe she was right. That's why he was being so rude to me and barely looking at me. A couple of weeks went on like that, and I was getting restless, so I confronted him. He got really aggressive. He didn't even try to have a civil conversation with me. He just yelled at me like I was being a nuisance. It was horrifying to see him transform into this angry, almost violent person in front of me. I didn't know what to do at that point. I was feeling all alone and helpless. I was so full of regrets after a few weeks of being married that it was eating me alive. Maybe I wouldn't be in this place if I listened to my mother-in-law when I had the chance. Am I wrong for not listening to the warning bell she was ringing in the first place? Update 1. Nothing changed, even after a whole month of marriage, and I was at an all-time low. I couldn't figure him out for the life of me. He was acting like a walking, talking red flag, just like his mother had said. She had told me that he would make my life miserable, and honestly, he was kind of succeeding at it. I had no one to blame but myself. I was the one who was so eager to get married that I didn't even think about the consequences of marrying the wrong person, and now I was suffering. He wasn't even looking at me after that day when he yelled at me for questioning him. There was no talk between us. I was actually a little scared that he would go off on me again if I tried to talk to him. I had my suspicions about him cheating because he would stay put all night. I dare not say it though because I didn't know what mood I might get. I started to think that I actually didn't know this guy at all. He had been a perfect gentleman when we were dating, but we didn't talk about anything substantial. He was just putting on a front because what I saw after our wedding ceremony was the real him. He was sweet and attentive. He was distant and cruel. It was like living in that house alone with no one to talk to. I would not even stay in the same room as him for a long period of time because I didn't trust him at all. I knew he noticed that I was avoiding him but didn't say anything. I was okay with flying under the radar because I wasn't sure I would be okay to be in this sham of a marriage any longer. Update 2. After a week of silent treatment, he was the one who initiated the conversation. I wasn't expecting him to make the first move since he seemed pretty satisfied with our arrangement. He said that he wasn't proud of his behavior and we should just ignore each other. He said that he gets a little overwhelmed and folds in on himself, and that was why he was being all distant. I didn't think that was the reason he was acting like that, but I didn't say anything. He knew I was going to leave him, and that's why he was making an effort. I could tell he wasn't very sincere about his words. He apologized for yelling at me. I mean, it was the first time I had seen him like that, so I told him never to do that again. I believe in conversations and solutions, not yelling and storming out. He told me that he would try to be more forthcoming. I didn't say anything about that, but since he wanted to talk, I asked him if he was cheating on me. He was shocked, if his face was any indication, but schooled his features quickly. He laughed and told me that of course he wasn't cheating on me. I told him that his mother told me that just before we got married, and then his face morphed into anger. I knew I hit a nerve with that statement. He said not to believe his mother because she was crazy. His words, not mine. He asked what else his mother had been telling me, and I said nothing. I could see him getting agitated, and it was taking him a lot to stay calm. In the end, though, he told me that he would do anything to prove to me that he was the one for me. He knew I wasn't very convinced with his words. That's why he was making these declarations. He didn't want me to leave, and I, like a naive little girl, fell for it. I decided to give this marriage a second chance, and it all went back to like it was before. Him ignoring me avoiding him because I didn't know if he would yell at me. That's not how a happy marriage works. Update 3. After I gathered some courage, I had a conversation with my husband about how I was feeling neglected. He just kind of shrugged my worries off. He never really wanted to talk about our problems. When he wouldn't give me any time of day, I started to get worried that he might be doing something that he was hiding from me. I started doubting him. I did not like who I was becoming. I was not this insecure, irrational person, but his refusal to talk to me about anything that made me feel like this. I hated being all up in his business, but I wanted to know what he was doing and why he was hiding things from me. Why couldn't he just take a couple of minutes and tell me about his day? He was always on his phone, too. Instead of checking his phone behind his back, I decided to talk to him face to face. I asked him straight up if he was having an affair. It had been about 3 months since our wedding at this point, and he looked at me like I was crazy. Then he went ahead and called me crazy for even thinking that. He said that we already had this conversation and to leave him alone. I told him that I wasn't crazy at all, and he was all kinds of shady. If he keeps things from me, then I am going to doubt him. He said that he wasn't cheating, and I had hurt his feelings by even thinking that. I asked him who he was texting all day and why he didn't tell me about his day ever. He started yelling after that. He didn't have a logical answer to any of my questions, so the best thing he could do was argue. He was yelling at me for no reason. My questions were warranted. I wanted to know what my husband was doing behind my back, and he was busy gaslighting me. When he wouldn't open up and tell me anything, I told him that his mother had warned me about getting married to him. He got super mad after that. He told me that he never wanted to hear about his mother from my mouth again. He also forbade me to see his mother ever because she was poisoning me, according to him. I told him that I was starting to believe her and that maybe I shouldn't have gotten married to him in the first place. We were both yelling at this point, but I never expected what he would do next. He came really close to me and gripped my throat in a vice. He was trying to intimidate me. He tried to choke me out of anger. I was flailing and scratching his arms to tell him to let go, but he wasn't budging. After what felt like minutes, he finally dropped his arms, and it took me a long time to fully get my breath back. I was so scared that I was shaking. I didn't want him to see me weak, so I packed my bags and left. He didn't try to stop me, and he didn't apologize. Update 4. I went straight to my parents' place after I left my husband. I was still in shock and didn't even realize that I was where I was going until I was standing in front of my parents' place. It took me a lot of courage to knock because I didn't know how my parents were going to react. They had always wanted me to get married and start a family, but if they were to turn me away after what my husband had done, I would be devastated. I was almost in tears when I knocked on the door and my dad opened the door. His smile dropped as soon as he saw the tears streaming down my cheeks. He took me inside, and both he and my mom tried to calm me down. They asked me what was going on, and I told them that in the midst of arguing, my husband had become violent and choked me out of anger. They both looked horrified and told me that I wasn't going anywhere. They told me if my husband wanted to talk or apologize, he could come here because they wouldn't let me out of their sight. It was such a nice thing to say that I burst into tears. I had doubted my parents and thought that they might not understand where I was coming from. But they had proved me wrong. They were traditional regarding marriage and kids, but they always wanted what was best for their kids. They wanted to protect me from him, and I was grateful for that. They led me to my room and told me to get some rest. In the following days, I got several calls and texts from my husband. But I wasn't ready to talk to him yet, so I ignored it all. I did, however, get in touch with his mother. She came to see me at my parents' place and apologized. I was confused because I didn't know what she was apologizing for. Then she told me that she was sorry she couldn't protect me from him. I started crying yet again, and she told me that I was lucky that my parents were supportive. I asked her what she meant by that. She told me that my father-in-law was abusive towards her for many years, and my husband and brother were the same way with the women they dated. She told me that she could never get out of that situation because she had no one who cared about her enough to help her. But she wanted to be the one to help me. She told me that I shouldn't waste my time talking to him and should go ahead with the divorce already. He would only become more violent in future. I felt horrible for my own life and my mother-in-law's. It wasn't fair to either of us that we were dealt a shitty hand in life. Update 5. I finally relented and answered one of my husband's calls after about 2 weeks of leaving him. He sounded so relieved to hear from me that I almost felt bad for him. Almost. The first thing he asked me was when I was coming back home. He said that he was super worried about me and he was sorry that things got out of control when we fought, and he should have stopped me from leaving. He was blabbing away, not even giving me a chance to talk. When he finally stopped talking, I told him that I wasn't coming back home. He laughed at me and told me that I was being ridiculous. Husbands and wives fight all the time, but that doesn't mean they end their relationship. I reminded him that he was trying to physically hurt me during our fight, and he scoffed. He said that I wasn't hurt, and he just got a little carried away. He honestly believed that what he did was not a big deal. I told him I had a chat with his mother, and then it got out of control. He started yelling again and told me not to believe a word that woman said to me. I told him that he was a disgusting human being for letting his mother suffer like that and for doing the same thing to his own wife. He didn't have anything to say after that. He knew I had believed his mother, and there wasn't anything he could say that would change my mind. I sent him the divorce papers and he signed them without making a scene. We were divorced after a few months, but I wasn't done with him and his family. I got back in touch with his mom and apologized for the way I behaved. We have occasionally been meeting for lunches and coffee, and she is quite a nice woman. I am just happy to finally be free of that man. Stay tuned for more stories from Argo Relationships.